Tessa Fleming's alarm blared through her apartment at exactly 5:45 a.m., just as it did every weekday morning. She groaned, fumbling for her phone to silence the offensive noise before dragging herself upright. The architectural blueprints she'd been working on until 2 a.m. were still scattered across her bedsheets, evidence of yet another night when work had followed her to bed. Coffee, she mumbled to herself, shuffling through her sleek but Spartan apartment. As a rising star at Meridian Design Studios, Tessa had little time for decorating, cleaning, or anything resembling a personal life. Her apartment reflected this reality: expensive, minimalist, and desperately in need of attention. The kitchen counter was cluttered with takeout containers, and a thin layer of dust had settled over surfaces that hadn't been touched in weeks. Tessa sighed as she navigated the mess to reach her coffee maker. Her younger sister Penny had been nagging her about hiring help for months. "You make enough money to afford a housekeeper, and you clearly need one," Penny had insisted during their last video call. "There's this new service everyone at work is talking about, Stellar Home Solutions. They match you with the perfect home assistant. Just try it, Tess." Tessa had reluctantly applied, mostly to get her sister off her back. She'd almost forgotten about it until yesterday, when she'd received notification that her perfect match had been found and would arrive today. The timing couldn't have been worse. She had the Patterson project presentation in 3 days and barely enough time to finalize her designs, let alone deal with interviewing household help. A knock at her door jolted her from her thoughts. Tessa glanced at the clock, 6:15 a.m. Who would be at her door this early? "Miss Fleming?" a melodic voice called from the other side. "This is Novan from Stellar Home Solutions. I believe we have an appointment." Tessa nearly spilled her coffee. Was this the housekeeper? No. She hadn't even showered yet. "Just a minute," she called, frantically trying to smooth her wild auburn curls and wishing she wasn't wearing her ratty sleep shorts and MIT t-shirt with the coffee stain on the hem. When she opened the door, Tessa momentarily forgot how to speak. The man standing in her hallway was striking. Tall and lean, with unusual silver blonde hair that seemed to catch the light from odd angles. His eyes were the most peculiar shade of violet, almost luminescent against his pale skin. He wore a simple gray uniform with the Stellar Home Solutions logo, but somehow made it look like high fashion. "Good morning, Miss Fleming," he said with a slight bow. "I am Novan. The agency has assigned me to be your home assistant." His accent was unlike anything Tessa had ever heard, melodic and precise, with unusual emphases on certain syllables. "You're early," was all she managed to say. Novan tilted his head slightly. The assignment directive indicated 6:15 a.m. as the optimal commencement time based on your schedule patterns. Is this incorrect? Tessa blinked. No, I guess not. I just wasn't expecting. Never mind. Please, come in. She stepped aside, suddenly hyper-aware of the state of her apartment. Novan glided past her, and glided was the only word for his unusual, fluid movement, and surveyed the space with keen interest. "Fascinating dwelling," he murmured, his violet eyes taking in every detail. "Much more individual than the standardized units I've observed." "It's a mess," Tessa said bluntly. "I've been swamped with work and—" "No need for explanations, Ms. Fleming," Novan interrupted gently. "Disorder is simply matter awaiting proper arrangement. I find the challenge stimulating." There was something unusual about his speech pattern, the way he formed sentences with such careful precision. Tessa attributed it to English obviously not being his first language. "Well, I have a huge presentation in 3 days, so I'll need to work from home most of that time," Tessa explained, watching as Novan examined her collection of architectural awards with curious fingers. "Will that be a problem?" "Not at all," he replied, turning to her with a smile that seemed to brighten the room. "I am designed, that is, I am trained to operate with minimal disruption. You will barely notice my presence." Something about that phrasing struck Tessa as odd, but before she could ponder it further, Novan continued. "Perhaps you could orient me to your preferences. The agency provided basic parameters, but individual customization improves satisfaction outcomes. Right, Tessa said, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. Well, I'm not really home much during normal hours. I leave for the office around 7:30 most days and sometimes don't get back until 9 or 10. Except for this week, when I'll be mostly working from the dining table there. She pointed to the glass-top table currently buried under more blueprints and sketches. Novin nodded, seemingly making mental notes. And your nutritional preferences? My what? Oh, food. I mostly order in. There's not much in the fridge. I see. Novin moved toward the kitchen with that same strange, flowing gait. And your sleeping chamber? Do you permit arrangement there as well? My bedroom? Yes, that's fine, Tessa said, following him. Look, I haven't done this before. How does payment work? The agency wasn't clear about. She stopped short. Novin was standing in her kitchen, his head tilted at an impossible angle as he examined the ceiling corner, where a small spider had built a web. Fascinating defensive structure, he murmured. The geometric precision is remarkable for a species with such limited cognitive capacity. It's just a spider web, Tessa said, confused. Novin's head snapped back to a normal position so quickly it seemed unnatural. Of course. My apologies for the digression. You were inquiring about compensation protocols. Tessa frowned. Something was definitely off about this man. Yes, payment. And hours. And, well, everything else about this arrangement. All administrative details have been processed through the agency, Novin explained. Your account has been debited for the first month of service. As for hours, I will maintain your dwelling from 6:15 a.m. until 8:30 p.m., with a midday recalibration period of 47 minutes. A what? A break, he clarified. I require a break at approximately 1:13 p.m. each day. Such oddly precise timing. Tessa was beginning to wonder what kind of service her sister had recommended. That's fine, she said slowly. I'll be working in the dining area today, so feel free to start, wherever you think best. Novin nodded. I will begin atmospheric purification and surface restoration immediately. You mean dusting and air freshening? He smiled that strange, luminous smile again. Indeed. Your vernacular is much more efficient. As Tessa retreated to shower and dress, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very unusual about her new housekeeper. His mannerisms, his speech, even the way he moved seemed slightly off. Foreign, certainly, but something more than that. When she emerged from her bedroom 40 minutes later, dressed in her work-from-home attire of comfortable jeans and a cashmere sweater, she stopped dead in her tracks. Her apartment was transforming. The living room was immaculate, surfaces gleaming in a way she hadn't seen since move-in day. The air smelled fresh and somehow reminded her of a summer meadow. And Novin was currently arranging her collection of architecture books by what appeared to be some intricate system she couldn't immediately decipher. How did you do all this so quickly? She asked, amazed. Novin turned, seemingly surprised by her question. I operate at optimal efficiency, he said simply. Is the arrangement satisfactory? It's incredible, Tessa admitted. But you've organized my books strangely. Not alphabetically or by size. By chromatic wavelength and conceptual resonance, Novin explained as if this were perfectly normal. I find it creates a more harmonious energy flow. But I can rearrange them according to Earth, that is, according to conventional methods if you prefer. Earth methods? What an odd way to phrase it. No, it's fine, Tessa said, increasingly curious about her unusual new housekeeper. Actually, I kind of like it. Throughout the day, Tessa tried to focus on her work, but found herself repeatedly distracted by Novin's presence. He moved through her apartment with graceful efficiency, transforming chaos into order with seemingly minimal effort. Occasionally, she caught him doing something peculiar, standing perfectly still for minutes at a time, or studying everyday objects with intense fascination. At exactly 1:13 p.m., Novin approached her workstation. "I will now commence my recalibration period," he announced. "I require a space with minimal light and sound interference." Sure," Tessa said, gesturing toward the guest room. "You can use that room. Take whatever time you need." 47 minutes, he replied precisely. "Not more, not less." As promised, he emerged exactly 47 minutes later, looking refreshed and perhaps even more luminous than before. Tessa couldn't help but wonder what kind of break required such specific timing. By evening, her apartment was unrecognizable, spotless, organized, and somehow more harmonious than it had ever been. Even more surprising, Novin had prepared dinner from the meager ingredients in her pantry, a simple but delicious pasta dish that tasted better than most restaurant meals she'd had recently. "This is amazing," she said between bites. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "Molecular gastronomy is a simple application of chemical principles," Novin replied, watching her eat with an intensity that might have been uncomfortable if it weren't so genuinely curious. "The combination of textures and flavors adheres to universal patterns of sensory satisfaction." That night, after Novin had departed with a formal bow and a promise to return at precisely 6:15 the next morning, Tessa lay in bed contemplating her strange new housekeeper. There was something about him, beyond his unusual appearance and mannerisms, that both intrigued and unsettled her. As she drifted off to sleep in sheets that somehow smelled of starlight, if starlight had a smell, one thought circled in her mind: whoever, or whatever, Novin was, her life had just become infinitely more interesting. The next morning, Tessa woke before her alarm, surprisingly refreshed. For the first time in months, her bedroom felt like a sanctuary rather than a workspace. The blueprints that had previously cluttered her bed were now neatly arranged on her desk, organized in a system that somehow made perfect sense despite her never having seen it before. She found herself eager to start the day, an unusual feeling for someone who typically grumbled through her first 2 cups of coffee. The prospect of seeing Novin again sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach, which she quickly attributed to professional curiosity. After all, he was by far the most interesting housekeeper she'd ever encountered. At exactly 6:15 a.m., there was a soft knock at her door. Tessa had made sure to be presentable this time, having showered and dressed in comfortable work clothes. "Good morning, Miss Fleming," Novin greeted her with that now familiar slight bow. Today, she noticed a subtle shimmering quality to his skin, almost as if he had applied some kind of iridescent powder. In the morning light streaming through her windows, the effect was mesmerizing. "Please, call me Tessa," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Miss Fleming makes me feel like my mother." Novin tilted his head in that curious way of his. "Tessa," he repeated, as if tasting the name. "A pleasant phonetic arrangement. Thank you for the intimacy privilege." "The what now?" In my culture, the use of personal designations rather than formal titles indicates a closer relationship tier," he explained, moving past her into the apartment. "Right. Of course," Tessa said, following him. "Speaking of your culture, where exactly are you from? Your accent is unlike anything I've ever heard." Novin paused, his back to her for a moment longer than seemed natural. "I originate from a remote northern region. Our community is quite isolated from mainstream influences." "Which country?" Tessa pressed, her curiosity piqued. "We do not define our territory by conventional national boundaries," he replied, turning to face her with a smile that didn't quite reach his unusual violet eyes. "Perhaps you would prefer to discuss your work requirements for today. I've prepared a morning energy infusion for you." He gestured toward the kitchen counter, where a steaming mug waited. Tessa decided not to push the geography question for now and accepted the diversion. Taking a sip from the mug, she was surprised by the complex flavors, something like coffee but with notes she couldn't identify, simultaneously energizing and calming. "This is incredible," she said. "What's in it?" "A proprietary blend," Novin replied. "The agency permits us to use certain, specialized ingredients for client optimization. Client optimization? Tessa laughed. You make me sound like a computer program needing an upgrade. Novan's expression remained serious. All biological systems benefit from proper maintenance and enhancement, Tessa. Your work productivity will increase approximately 27% with adequate nutritional support. Before Tessa could respond to this oddly specific claim, Novan glided toward her dining table workstation. I notice your design incorporates curved elements that conflict with the structural support system, he said, gesturing toward her blueprints. Perhaps a helical reinforcement pattern would resolve the tension points. Tessa nearly choked on her drink. You understand architectural design. I possess knowledge across multiple disciplines, he said simply. Is my observation incorrect? No, it's actually spot on, Tessa admitted, coming closer to examine her own work. I've been struggling with that section for days. A helical pattern might be exactly what's needed. She looked at him with newfound respect. What exactly did you do before becoming a housekeeper? I have occupied numerous functions, Novan replied vaguely. Information acquisition is my specialty. Your architectural concepts are particularly fascinating. They incorporate principles reminiscent of crystalline growth patterns I've studied. Throughout the morning, Tessa found herself increasingly distracted by Novan's presence. While she worked, he moved through her apartment with that strange fluid grace, occasionally pausing to study something ordinary, the pattern of light through her blinds, the water flowing from her tap, with intense fascination. Several times, she caught him watching her with equal interest, quickly averting his gaze when she noticed. Around noon, Tessa stretched her stiff muscles and decided to take a break. She found Novan in the spare bedroom, standing perfectly still in the center of the room, his eyes closed and arms slightly extended. Novan, she called from the doorway. His eyes snapped open, fixing on her with such intensity that Tessa felt a shiver run down her spine. My apologies, he said, lowering his arms. I was conducting an energy alignment procedure. You mean, meditating? Tessa asked. Similar, but with directed purpose, he explained, moving toward her. Your dwelling contains unusual energy currents. I was attempting to harmonize with them. He was standing very close now, and Tessa couldn't help but notice the subtle scent emanating from him, something like ozone after a lightning storm, clean and electric. You have unusual practices, she observed, not stepping back despite their proximity. As do you, he countered, his violet eyes studying her face with scientific interest. For instance, your respiratory rate increases when I move closer to you. Is this a common human response to proximity? Tessa felt her cheeks warm. It depends on the human and the proximity, she said carefully. Sometimes it indicates interest. Interest, Novan repeated, taking another small step closer. I find your physiological responses fascinating, Tessa Fleming. They suggest complex internal processes that your verbal communications do not acknowledge. That's a very clinical way of saying I'm not being completely honest, Tessa said with a nervous laugh. Are humans always honest about biological attraction responses? He asked with genuine curiosity. Tessa's eyebrows shot up. Attraction? I never said. Your dilated pupils, elevated heart rate, and increased body temperature indicate attraction parameters, Novan stated matter-of-factly. I experience similar responses in your presence, though my biology processes them differently. Tessa took a step back, both flustered and intrigued by his directness. Look, Novan, this conversation is getting a bit unprofessional. You work for me, N. Professional parameters are culturally defined constructs, Novan interrupted gently. They vary widely across different societies. In my community, acknowledging mutual interest is considered the most efficient approach. Efficient isn't always best, Tessa countered, trying to regain her composure. Sometimes the dance is half the fun. Novan's head tilted in that now familiar curious gesture. Dance? Is rhythmic movement a courtship requirement? Despite her embarrassment, Tessa couldn't help but laugh. It's a metaphor. I meant the gradual process of getting to know someone, the back and forth of developing a relationship. Ah, Novan nodded solemnly. A prolonged evaluation period. This is acceptable. I will adjust my interaction protocols accordingly. Before Tessa could respond to this strange phrasing, her phone rang, her sister Penny calling for their weekly check-in. Grateful for the interruption, Tessa excused herself to take the call in the living room. So, how's the new housekeeper working out? Penny asked after their initial greetings. Tessa glanced toward the spare room, lowering her voice. He's unusual. Unusual how? Good unusual, or call the police unusual? Definitely good unusual, Tessa assured her. He's just different. Extremely efficient, oddly formal, and he says the strangest things sometimes. It's like he's not quite familiar with normal social interactions. Sounds like you, Penny teased. Very funny. But seriously, there's something about him that I can't quite put my finger on. He moves differently, speaks differently, even his eyes are an unusual color. Ooh, you've noticed his eyes? Is he cute? Penny's voice took on a suggestive tone. That's not the point, Tessa said, feeling her cheeks warm again. So that's a yes. Is he single? Penny. He works for me. So. Office romances happen all the time. Or in this case, home office romances. It's not appropriate, Tessa insisted, though she couldn't deny the strange pull she felt toward Novan. Besides, I don't have time for romantic complications right now. The Patterson presentation is tomorrow, and I still have modifications to make. All work and no play makes Tessa a very boring architect, Penny sing-songed. At least tell me you're eating properly. You always forget meals when you're on deadline. As if on cue, Novan appeared in the doorway, carrying a plate with an artfully arranged lunch. Tessa quickly ended the call with her sister, promising to check in after her presentation. I prepared a midday nutritional supplement, Novan announced, setting the plate before her. The combination of proteins and complex carbohydrates should optimize your cognitive functions for the afternoon work period. Thank you, Tessa said, examining the beautifully presented food. This looks restaurant quality. Presentation enhances flavor perception, Novan explained, watching intently as she took her first bite. Your satisfaction confirms my calibrations are accurate. As they settled into an afternoon work rhythm, Tessa found herself increasingly comfortable with Novan's presence. His unusual behaviors and speech patterns were becoming endearing rather than off-putting, and she couldn't deny the positive impact he was having on both her home and her work. His suggestions about the helical reinforcement had solved her design problem, and the Patterson presentation was now stronger than ever. When 1:13 p.m. arrived, Novan announced his recalibration period would commence. Can I ask you something before you go? Tessa ventured. Why exactly 47 minutes for your break? That's unusually specific. Novan hesitated before answering. My physiology requires precise cycling of rest and activity. 47 minutes represents the optimal duration for cellular regeneration without entering deep restoration phase. That sounds medical, Tessa observed. Is there something I should know about your health? My functioning is optimal, Novan assured her. The timing is merely a personal requirement. When he emerged exactly 47 minutes later, Tessa noticed that the subtle shimmer of his skin had intensified, almost as if he were illuminated from within. She found herself wondering, not for the first time, what exactly happened during these recalibration periods. As evening approached, Tessa felt the familiar tension headache that always preceded important presentations. Without her mentioning it, Novan appeared with a small vial of fragrant oil. Your stress indicators suggest muscular tension in your cervical region, he said. This remedy will provide relief, if you permit application. Too tired to question his perceptiveness, Tessa nodded. Novan moved behind her chair and began applying the oil to her neck and shoulders with strong, precise fingers. The effect was immediate, warmth spreading through her tense muscles, releasing knots she hadn't realized were there. "Your hands are so warm," she murmured, eyes closing as she relaxed into his touch. "My core temperature runs higher than the human average," Novan replied, his voice closer to her ear than she expected. "Another physiological distinction of my people." "And who exactly are your people?" Tessa asked dreamily, the soothing sensation of his hands making her bolder. There was a pause in the rhythmic movement of his fingers. "We are isolated. Few outside our community understand our ways." "Try me," Tessa challenged gently, turning to face him. Their faces were inches apart now, his unusual violet eyes capturing hers. "You are not ready for such knowledge," Novan said softly. "Human cognitive frameworks resist concepts that challenge established reality parameters." "You talk as if you're not human," Tessa said with a nervous laugh. Novan's expression remained serious. "All beings exist on a spectrum of consciousness, Tessa Fleming. The boundaries between classifications are more permeable than your sciences acknowledge." Something in his tone sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. They were still very close, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders, his strange eyes searching hers. In that moment, Tessa knew with certainty that whatever Novan was, he wasn't simply a foreign housekeeper with unusual customs. "Who are you really?" she whispered. Instead of answering, Novan lifted one hand to her face, his fingertips brushing her cheek with a touch so light it might have been imagined. Where his skin met hers, Tessa felt a strange tingling sensation, almost like a mild electric current. "Your molecular structure resonates at a frequency compatible with mine," he said softly. "This is extremely rare across different." "Different what?" Tessa prompted when he trailed off. "Different backgrounds," he finished, withdrawing his hand. "The hour grows late. You require adequate rest before your presentation. I will prepare your dwelling for sleep cycle." As he moved away, breaking the strange tension between them, Tessa felt simultaneously relieved and disappointed. The moment had been intense, charged with something she couldn't name, something beyond ordinary attraction. That night, after Novan had departed with his usual formal bow, Tessa lay awake replaying their interaction. His strange comments, his unusual physiological traits, his apparent knowledge across diverse fields, all pointed to something beyond ordinary human variation. "Different backgrounds," she whispered to herself in the darkness. "Different species is more like it." The thought should have frightened her, or at least seemed absurd. Instead, it created a curious flutter of excitement in her chest. If Novan wasn't human, what was he? And why was he working as her housekeeper? As she finally drifted toward sleep, one certainty formed in her mind: tomorrow, after her presentation, she would find answers to these questions. One way or another, she would discover Novan's true identity, and why he had really come into her life. Tessa's presentation for the Patterson project was nothing short of triumphant. The clients had loved her innovative approach to the structural challenges, particularly the helical reinforcement solution that Novan had suggested. As she packed up her materials at the conference room table, surrounded by congratulatory colleagues, her mind kept drifting back to her unusual housekeeper and their strange interaction the previous evening. "Earth to Tessa," her colleague Javier said, waving a hand in front of her face. "We're all heading to Riverside Lounge to celebrate. You coming?" "Sorry, I can't tonight," she replied, realizing she had no desire to prolong the workday with obligatory socialization. "I've got something important waiting for me at home." Javier raised an eyebrow. "Something or someone? You've been distracted all day, even during your presentation." "Spill it, Fleming, who's the lucky guy?" "It's not like that," Tessa protested, feeling her cheeks warm. "It's just a personal matter I need to resolve." "Aha," Javier smirked. "Well, whoever he is, he must be something special to have you rushing home instead of celebrating your biggest project to date." Tessa didn't bother correcting him. How could she explain that she was eager to get home to interrogate her possibly non-human housekeeper? Instead, she offered her thanks for the team's support and made her escape, her mind already formulating questions for Novan. When she arrived home, however, her apartment was unexpectedly dark and silent. "Novan," she called out, setting down her portfolio and flicking on lights. No answer. A quick search confirmed he wasn't in any of the rooms. On her dining table, where her work materials had been, she found a single sheet of paper with elegant, flowing script. "Tessa Fleming. Celebratory acknowledgement on your successful presentation. Your dwelling has been prepared for optimal relaxation following your achievement. A nutrient-rich meal awaits in the thermal maintenance unit. I have been called away for an urgent matter but will return tomorrow at the standard hour. With respectful regard. Novan." Tessa read the note twice, feeling a mix of disappointment and curiosity. What urgent matter could have called him away? And how did he know her presentation had been successful? Opening her refrigerator, the thermal maintenance unit, she found an elaborate meal carefully packaged and labeled with reheating instructions. Despite her disappointment at Novan's absence, she couldn't help but smile at his thoughtfulness. After enjoying the delicious meal, some kind of fusion cuisine she couldn't quite identify, Tessa found herself wandering through her apartment, noticing all the subtle ways Novan had transformed her space. Beyond the obvious cleaning and organizing, there were changes that spoke to a deeper understanding of her needs, the way her desk was now positioned to catch the best natural light, how her books were arranged for easy access to the references she used most often, even the subtle fragrance in her bedroom that somehow helped her sleep better. In the guest room, where Novan took his recalibration periods, she noticed something she had overlooked before, a faint circular pattern on the hardwood floor, almost like a burn mark but with intricate, geometric designs within it. Kneeling to examine it more closely, Tessa realized the pattern resembled the night sky, with dots and lines interconnecting in a way that suggested constellations. Her phone buzzed, a text from Penny, "How'd the big presentation go? And more importantly, any updates on the mysterious hot housekeeper?" Tessa smiled and was about to reply when she heard a strange humming sound coming from her balcony. Curious, she moved toward the glass doors and froze at the sight that greeted her. Novan stood on her small balcony, bathed in an ethereal blue light that seemed to emanate from his own skin. His hands were raised toward the night sky, and between them hovered what looked like a small, swirling galaxy of light particles. As she watched, transfixed, the particles formed into shapes and patterns, almost like a three-dimensional holographic display. Tessa stood motionless, afraid any movement would break the spell of this impossible sight. But when Novan suddenly turned, sensing her presence, she couldn't help but gasp. His eyes were no longer merely violet, they glowed with an inner light that matched the blue luminescence of his skin. "Tessa Fleming," he said, his voice resonating with harmonic overtones she'd never heard before. "This is not optimal timing. What are you?" Tessa whispered, stepping closer to the glass door. Novan lowered his hands, and the swirling lights between them dimmed but didn't disappear. After a moment of apparent deliberation, he slid open the balcony door. "Please join me," he said. "The explanation you seek is better demonstrated than verbalized." Heart pounding, Tessa stepped onto the balcony. The night air was cool against her skin, but she felt a warmth radiating from Novan that had nothing to do with normal body heat. "You're not human," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Novan agreed simply. "My biology differs significantly from yours, though our outward forms share similarities." "Are you an alien?" The word felt ridiculous leaving her lips, like something from a science fiction movie, but the evidence before her eyes left little room for other explanations. "By your definition, yes. My origin is not within your solar system." He gestured to the night sky. "My home orbits a star you call Epsilon Eridani, approximately 10.5 light-years from Earth." Tessa felt dizzy with the implications. "And you're working as my housekeeper because..." Novan's luminous features softened into what appeared to be amusement. "Cultural immersion is required before formal contact protocols can be established. My people believe in thorough understanding before diplomatic engagement. Wait, you're some kind of diplomat? Tessa asked, struggling to process this revelation. In your terminology, perhaps. Though, cultural anthropologist might be more accurate. He raised his hands again, and the swirling lights between them expanded to form what Tessa recognized as a star map. My assignment was to study human habitation patterns and social structures through direct observation. By cleaning my apartment? By integrating into human domestic systems, Novan corrected. Your living space reveals much about your species' priorities, challenges, and potential. And you, Tessa Fleming, were selected because your psychological profile indicated high adaptability and intellectual curiosity, traits valued among my people. Tessa leaned against the balcony railing, feeling overwhelmed. So I was just a research subject. An experiment? Something shifted in Novan's glowing expression, a flash of what might have been regret. Initially, yes. But my experiences with you have complicated my mission parameters. Complicated how? Instead of answering directly, Novan moved closer to her, the star map between his hands collapsing into a small, intense point of light. Among my people, emotional connections are rare and considered sacred. Our biology does not typically allow for bonds with other species. But? Tessa prompted, sensing there was more. But you are an anomaly, Tessa Fleming. Your energy signature resonates with mine in ways that should be impossible across our biological differences. He lifted one glowing hand toward her face, stopping just short of touching her cheek. May I show you? Tessa nodded, unable to form words. When Novan's fingers made contact with her skin, the world around Tessa seemed to dissolve. Suddenly, she was experiencing sensations she had no human reference for, colors beyond a visible spectrum, sounds that carried emotion rather than just vibration, and a profound sense of connection to something vast and ancient. Within this sensory maelstrom, she could feel Novan's consciousness touching hers, alien and yet somehow familiar, like a melody she'd always known but never heard. This is how my people communicate at the deepest level, his thoughts resonated within her mind. What you feel now is the resonance between our energy patterns, rare even among my own kind, unprecedented between our species. As abruptly as it had begun, the connection ended, leaving Tessa gasping and disoriented. She gripped the balcony railing for support. That was incredible, she managed, once she could speak again. Is that what you experience all the time? A simplified version, Novan admitted, his glow dimming slightly. Your neural pathways cannot process our full perceptual range without adaptation. But the connection itself, that was genuine. Tessa tried to gather her thoughts, which felt scattered across the universe after what she'd just experienced. So what happens now? Do you report back to your people that humans like to order takeout and work too much? A sound like chiming crystals emanated from Novan. She realized he was laughing. My observations are more nuanced than that. But yes, I will eventually submit my findings. However. He paused, his luminescence pulsing slightly. The unexpected connection between us presents a complication. It is not accounted for in my mission protocols. Is it forbidden? Tessa asked, surprised by the pang of disappointment the thought caused her. Not forbidden, unprecedented. There are no protocols because such a connection has never been documented. Novan moved closer still, until she could feel the strange energy emanating from him. My people value new discoveries above all else. This connection would be considered a significant finding. So I'd be an even more interesting experiment, Tessa said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. No. Novan's tone was firm. You would be recognized as sentient reciprocal, a being capable of meaningful exchange across biological boundaries. It is our highest designation for non-Eridani life forms. Before Tessa could respond, the sound of her apartment door opening and Penny's voice calling out interrupted them. Tess. Why aren't you answering your phone? I used my emergency key because I was worried you, oh my God. Penny stood frozen in the balcony doorway, eyes wide with shock as she took in the scene before her, Novan still glowing with unearthly blue light, the small galaxy of particles now swirling agitatedly between his raised hands, and Tessa standing mere inches from him, apparently unafraid. "What the hell is happening?" Penny demanded, her voice rising with panic. "Tessa, get away from whatever that is." "Penny, calm down," Tessa said, moving toward her sister with hands raised placatingly. "This is Novan. My housekeeper. And yes, he's an alien, but he's not dangerous." "Not dangerous?" "He's glowing." "People don't glow, Tessa." Penny backed up into the living room, fumbling for her phone. "I'm calling the police, or the army, or NASA, or whoever handles alien invasions." "Penny, stop." Tessa lunged forward and grabbed her sister's phone. "You can't tell anyone about this. Please." Novan had followed them inside, his glow dimming to a subtle shimmer as he moved. "Your sister's reaction is statistically expected," he said calmly. "Fear responses to unknown biological entities are hardwired into human neural pathways." "Not helping, Novan," Tessa hissed before turning back to her sister. "Penny, please sit down. Let me explain. Or let us explain." Remarkably, Penny complied, sinking onto the couch while keeping her wide eyes fixed on Novan. "You're really an alien?" she asked directly, her voice steadier than Tessa would have expected. "Like, from another planet?" "Yes," Novan confirmed. "Though, alien, is a relative term. To me, you are the alien life form." A hysterical laugh escaped Penny. "Fair point. So what are you doing in my sister's apartment? Besides glowing and floating little galaxies around?" Over the next hour, Tessa and Novan explained everything, his mission, their unexpected connection, and the implications of this cross-species resonance. As Penny's initial shock faded, her natural curiosity emerged. "So this Stellar Home Solutions isn't actually a housekeeping service?" she asked. "It's an alien research front." "It functions as both," Novan explained. "The services provided are genuine, allowing us to observe human habitation patterns while maintaining cover." "Your recommendation brought Tessa into our study cohort." Penny shot Tessa a smug look. "You're welcome. I got you a hot alien boyfriend." "He's not my," Tessa began, then stopped, unsure how to categorize whatever was developing between them. "The nature of our connection defies simple classification," Novan offered, his iridescent skin shimmering slightly more intensely when he looked at Tessa. "But the resonance is undeniable." "Great, now I'm the third will to an interspecies romance," Penny muttered, though her expression was more amused than upset. She studied Novan with renewed interest. "So can all your people do that glowy thing? And the floating light show?" "Bioluminescence is common among my species," Novan explained. "The energy manipulation you witnessed is a specialized skill, used primarily for data visualization and communication across distances." "And that circle pattern in the guest room?" Tessa asked, thinking of the strange mark she'd discovered earlier. "A resonance anchor," Novan said. "It stabilizes my energy field during recalibration periods and allows for brief contact with my research team." As the night deepened, Penny eventually left with a solemn promise not to reveal Novan's true nature to anyone, though not before extracting a promise from both of them to keep her updated on their cosmic romance, as she had dubbed it. Once they were alone again, Tessa and Novan returned to the balcony. The night sky seemed different to Tessa now, no longer just a distant backdrop but a vast sea of possibilities, one of which had somehow led Novan to her door. "When will you have to return to your world?" she asked softly, dreading the answer. "My observation period extends 2 more Earth months," Novan replied. "After that?" He hesitated, his glow dimming slightly. "After that, protocols dictate I return with my findings." Tessa felt a hollow sensation in her chest. "And this connection between us? What happens to that?" Novan turned to her, his luminous eyes capturing hers. That depends on choices yet unmade. My people value knowledge above all else. The discovery of our resonance could open new pathways of understanding between our worlds. But would we be together? Tessa pressed, surprised by how much the answer mattered to her after such a short time. Instead of speaking, Novan extended his hand, palm up, small particles of light dancing above it. May I show you possibilities? When Tessa placed her hand in his, the connection bloomed again, gentler this time but no less profound. Within the shared consciousness, she glimpsed fragments of potential futures, herself among stars she'd never seen, surrounded by beings of light, Novan on Earth, learning and growing alongside her, both of them moving between worlds as bridges between their species. Whether these were predictions, hopes, or simply expressions of possibility, Tessa couldn't tell. But when the connection faded, leaving them standing hand in hand beneath the Earth's stars, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, hope for a future beyond the next architectural project, the next deadline, the next day. I don't know what this is between us, she said softly, but I want to explore it while we have time. Novan's free hand rose to gently touch her cheek, his skin warm and tingling against hers. Time is relative, Tessa Fleming. What matters is resonance, and ours transcends conventional boundaries. As they stood together on the balcony, the distance between their worlds seemed simultaneously vast and insignificant. Whatever challenges lay ahead, cultural differences, biological incompatibilities, the inevitable scrutiny of both their societies, in this moment, under stars that had witnessed the birth and death of countless civilizations, Tessa knew one thing with absolute certainty: some connections were worth risking everything for. And as Novan's luminescence enveloped them both in a gentle blue glow, Earth and Epsilon Eridani no longer seemed worlds apart, but rather 2 points on the same cosmic continuum, connected by understanding, curiosity, and something that, in any language of any species, could only be described as love.